Jeez, he hasn't stopped laughing since last week. Come on, dude. I mean, it's not as though this anime is suddenly gonna turn into your show or something. Oh. Well, this is awkward. Surprisingly, after a doozy of a cliffhanger from last week, we open with the usually cheerful little prologue before recapping all of that good PG stuff. In hindsight, it was a nice little bit of symbolism there, going straight for her stomach, and, well, more on that later. But yeah, Daisen had implanted Nodoka with a Megapart in the hopes of creating yet another pseudo-general like the previous two. The rest of the cures soon arrived to ward him off, but obviously they were a little too late. They took Nodoka back to her parents, who were going to take her straight to the hospital. Said parents pointed out that their daughter might be experiencing a relapse, as the symptoms she was showing were similar to her childhood ailments. Sure enough, her doctor confirmed this, and the fact that much like back then, they had no idea what it was or how to treat it.
現時点では以前と同じく原因不明です。
It's the bug survivor! Hold it in, man. Hold it in. Meanwhile, in the Byogen Kingdom, the king wanted to know why Daisen had been slacking with his efforts to infect the earth, which, considering that his name basically meant slovenliness, it shouldn't be that big a surprise, but he did have an excuse, in that he was experimenting in creating more generals, or Terabyogens as we'll call them now. He claimed to his fellow Terabyogens that he was doing this all on a whim, but as we'll later see, there might have been some more Freudian excuses for his actions. Back with the healthy cures, they were of course making the connection that Nodoka's previous ailments were likely the result of a Megapart infection. Sure enough, Pekita and Yatran confirmed that there were some Byogens that Teatinu and the original Cure Earth had failed to defeat, including the current king. And I guess we can assume that the Terabyogens they were currently fighting likely slipped under her nose after they retired from active Precure duty. This is actually some interesting world building that I do kind of wish they had given to us a little earlier, but then I guess some fans might have been able to make certain connections to other shows. Anyway, fearing the worst for their friend, they decide to check up on Nodoka. At the hospital, Rablin, of course, felt the most guilty for not only failing to protect her partner, but once again for even choosing Nodoka in the first place. Like always with these two, it was a great scene that reminded us that these two are the best partners for each other, as Nodoka even assured her little friend that she had no regrets of becoming a Precure, as it encouraged her to become stronger both physically and mentally. Though as nice as the scene is, all I can really think about is all the magical girls Aoyuki has voiced, and how they all seem to share a certain pattern. Sure enough, the suffering intensified for the Maoka clone, but as it turned out, it was actually her Precure powers trying to reject the Terabyogen in her. Thus, with the support of Rablin and all of her friends at the hospital, she managed to get that Terabyogen out of her. Well, at least now I'm being reminded of a fellow Precure series rather than Kamen Rider. Anyway, with Nodoka's powers having rid her of an infection much sooner than her previous one, she was already feeling a lot better. However, there was still the little issue of the escaped Terabyogen. Fortunately, Daisen confirmed that it was incomplete, having been incubated for less than a day. Still, since it was created from a Homo sapien, it had much greater evolution capabilities.
僕進化した
Yeah, I know what some people might be thinking here, but let's not go there just yet, please. The mini Daisen, or Kedari as he preferred to be called, got straight to work, and thus the Precure went into action. We got a really good fight this week, as not only did veteran animator Akira Inagami come back this week, but this little guy put up such a good fight that he even managed to take down Asumi.
Thank you!
However, as good as this fight was, the real highlight of this episode came from Daisen, who, after seeing all of this, started to remember his own past, including where he came from, which turned out to be... FYI, spoilers for Kamen Rider X8 coming up, so if you don't want to hear them, skip to this time. So yeah, I really should have used that X8 clip last week, because this, it's essentially Emu and Pardo. I mean, how can you not see the similarities? Our main character got infected by a malicious force, the infection incubated in them for several years before eventually leaving the host to become one of the main villains of the season. Meanwhile, the victim decided to become a superhuman doctor in order to prevent others from suffering like they did. Aw man, now I really do want to use that Kuroto clip. But the copyright bots will probably get me. Well, not as though it really matters, as Darzin gave her a similar, though not quite as hammy, speech after they defeated Kedari. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention, they kind of abruptly defeated him after Asumi used her new elemental bottle. Alright, I know I should be really annoyed by this, but hey, at least the original trio delivered the finishing blow, and again, the real highlight of this episode was Darzin. Also, yeah, let's not consider Kedari as Nodoka and Darzin's kid, because then we would also have to consider Darzin Nodoka's son and...
I'm not touching that with a 60-foot pole.
Anyway, he went on to completely destroy the Precure, in particular Nodoka, by making her realize that she was the source of a horrible monster. Thus, the episode ended with Nodoka assuring her parents that she was okay, while also resolving to change the destiny of Darzin. Alright, so first of all, I'll say this was a really good episode with plenty of world building and some great animation by Akira Inagami. But at the same time, I'm not exactly sure how to feel about all of these Exade connections. I mean, on the one hand, it is one of my favorite Kamen Rider series of recent memory, so I do kind of like the idea of seeing an anime version of it. But at the same time, should I really be praising something that is wholesale lifting from that show? We'll just have to see if the show can bring its own unique touches, so color me interested if anything else. Even though she didn't write for Exade, head writer Junko Komura has written for a lot of Kamen Rider, so she had to know this was a thing, and has likely been planning it from the very beginning, with even the opening hinting at it, with Nodoka and Darzin passing through each other as though he was leaving her body. Now, to be fair, Precure is certainly no stranger to taking elements from Kamen Rider both for motifs and yes, plot points. But this just feels more blatant than finding living embodiments of greed. Now again, Exade is currently in my top 5 Kamen Rider series, so a part of me is certainly looking forward to where they take this, but I just hope that it can stand on its own. Because all that aside, this was a great episode for this series. We finally got some more big details about our antagonists that makes logical sense. They were all likely created from human hosts, the most highly evolved creatures on this planet, hence more evolutionary capabilities for them. Even a highly undercooked Terabyogen was a challenge, thus giving a huge sense of uncertainty for when they'll have to eventually fight guys like Darzin, who was in Nodoka for years. And again, this week's animation was really good, in particular some fantastic shadowing that really got across Nodoka's poor health. And abrupt end aside, the fight this week was the perfect length to both be satisfying and allow space for Darzin's important monologue. Overall, while this all does kind of feel familiar to me, at least it's the good kind of familiar. If anything, I'm looking forward to the inevitable Exade Healing Good crossover Dojishin. If you haven't seen it yet, and I wouldn't blame you since I did kind of do it on a whim, I made a little video about my impressions of the second episode of the Higurashi 2020 series, and yeah, you know what I said last week about the show possibly not being newbie friendly? Yeah, it's a little bit worse than I originally imagined. I won't show too much here because unlike this anime, I don't want to ruin things for anyone who is completely unfamiliar with this series, but yeah, as it turns out, this was a sequel disguised as a remake. So either go read the original sound or visual novels, or watch the original anime because I do think there's some potentially good stuff on the horizon. On that note, what are your guys' top anime picks for this season? For me personally, aside from Higurashi, I'm gonna say The Sleepy Princess in the Demon Castle, which had a great clock tower reference in its first episode, and The Talentless Nana. Feel free to leave your picks in the comments below, and until next time, farewell for now my friends, and I think I'm gonna need a few more goshot before the season is over.